Hello and welcome to our channel Fluent Harbor. Imagine packing your whole life into 4 boxes. That's exactly what Daniel did on a rainy Tuesday morning, the day he moved into his very first apartment, alone. He was 24 years old. He had a stable job, a small car, and for the first time in his life, no roommates, no parents down the hall, and no one to talk to when he got home. Most people think moving out is simple. You find a place, you sign a paper, and you start your new life. But Daniel's story shows something different. It shows what really happens in the first weeks of living alone, the silence, the mistakes, and eventually the change that surprised even him. By the end of this video, you'll understand why so many people find living alone harder than they expect, and what actually helps. Daniel's new apartment was small. 1 bedroom, 1 kitchen, and a window that looked out over a quiet street. On his first night, he sat on the floor because he hadn't bought a sofa yet. He opened a box of instant noodles, looked around the empty room, and thought, "This is it. This is my life now." At first, it felt exciting. He could play music as loud as he wanted. He could leave dishes in the sink for 2 days if he felt like it. Nobody would say anything. But excitement, as Daniel would soon learn, doesn't last very long when you're on your own. The first week was full of small surprises. Daniel realized he didn't know how to fix a leaking tap. He didn't know which day the garbage truck came. He burned his dinner twice because he'd never actually had to cook for himself before. His mother had always done it, and later his roommates had shared the job. These weren't big problems, but they added up. By the second week, something else appeared: silence. Not the peaceful kind, the heavy kind. Daniel would come home from work, open the door, and hear nothing. No television from another room, no one asking about his day, just his own footsteps on the wooden floor. He started leaving the TV on, even when he wasn't watching it, just to fill the quiet. This is one of the most common experiences people report when they live alone for the first time. Psychologists who study loneliness point out that it's not really about being physically alone. It's about missing the small, everyday moments of connection that most people don't even notice until they're gone. A good morning. A shared laugh over something silly. Someone asking, "Did you eat yet?" Daniel didn't miss big events. He missed those tiny moments. By the third week, he noticed he was talking to himself more, narrating what he was doing while cooking, just to hear a voice in the apartment. He laughed about it at first. Then it started to feel less funny. One evening, about a month in, everything came to a head. Daniel had a bad day at work. Nothing serious, just one of those days where everything feels a little heavier than usual. He walked home in the rain, opened his apartment door, and stood there for a moment. There was no one to tell about his day. No one to make a joke and help him feel better. Just an empty room and a pile of unwashed laundry in the corner. He sat down on the floor again. He still hadn't bought that sofa. And, for the first time since moving out, he wondered if he'd made a mistake. This moment is worth pausing on, because it's more common than people admit. Many people who live alone for the first time go through a similar low point, usually somewhere between 3 and 8 weeks in. The initial excitement of freedom wears off, and the daily effort of managing everything, cooking, cleaning, paying bills, making decisions, starts to feel exhausting without anyone to share it with. Daniel didn't know any of this at the time. All he knew was that he felt more alone than he expected to feel, and he didn't know what to do about it. So he did something simple. He picked up his phone and called his older sister, Maya. He didn't plan to say much, but once she asked, "How's the new place?" Everything came out. The silence, the burnt dinners, the strange feeling of talking to himself in an empty kitchen. Maya listened. Then she said something that stuck with him. Living alone doesn't mean living without people. It just means you have to build those connections yourself now. Nobody's going to do it for you automatically anymore. The conversation changed something for Daniel, not immediately, but gradually. The next weekend, instead of staying inside, he went to the small coffee shop near his building, the one he'd walk past every day without going in. He ordered a coffee and, without really planning to, ended up talking to the owner, an older man named Farid, about the neighborhood. It wasn't a big moment, but it was a start. Daniel began doing small things differently. He set a simple rule for himself: cook one proper meal a day, even if it was just for one person. It sounds small, but the habit gave his evenings a shape. Instead of an empty stretch of time, he had something to focus on. He also started calling Maya every Sunday, just for 10 minutes. Not because he needed to, but because it gave his week a rhythm, a small fixed point he could look forward to. Then he joined a weekend badminton group he found through a notice board at the coffee shop. He almost didn't go. He nearly convinced himself he was too tired, or that it would be awkward showing up alone. But he went anyway. It was awkward for about 10 minutes. Then someone asked his name, someone else joked about his badly, picked racket, and by the end of the session, he'd agreed to come back the following week. Little by little, Daniel's apartment stopped feeling like an empty box and started feeling like a home. Not because it suddenly had more furniture, though he did finally buy that sofa, but because his life around it had more structure and more people in it. 3 months after moving in, Daniel's routine looked completely different from that first rainy night. He still lived alone. The apartment was still quiet when he first walked in, but it didn't feel the same. He knew how to cook a few solid meals now. He knew which neighbor to ask about the garbage schedule. He had Sunday calls with Maya, badminton on Saturdays, and a coffee shop where the owner knew his order. He hadn't solved loneliness by filling every hour with noise. He'd solved it by building small, repeated connections with people, with routines, and eventually with himself. Looking back, Daniel realized something important. Living alone had taught him more about independence in 3 months than anything else had in his whole life. Not because being alone is automatically good for you, it isn't. And the low points are real, but because it forced him to build habits and relationships on purpose, instead of receiving them automatically from the people around him. That's really the lesson at the center of this story. Living alone doesn't automatically make you stronger, and it doesn't automatically make you lonelier either. What matters is what you build during that time. The small routines, the small conversations, the small efforts to stay connected to other people. If you're living alone right now or thinking about it, Daniel's story is a reminder. The first weeks might be harder than you expect. That's normal. But it gets better. Usually not through one big change, but through small, steady ones. If this story helped you understand something new about English or about life, leave a comment and tell us. What's the hardest part of living alone in your experience? And don't forget to subscribe Fluent Harbor for more graded stories like this, one every week.